Authorities in Mississippi have located a body they believe likely belongs to a teen missing since the 4th of July.
That question mark is the most important character in this title. Proof of corruption? And the honest answer up front is no. There is no proof of corruption in the Mississippi District Attorney's Office. What there is a sealed autopsy, a slow grand jury process, and a lot of frustrated people filling that silence with the worst explanation they can imagine. So here are the two readings, and we're going to weigh them fairly. Reading 1, the one going viral. The DA is hiding something, and the secrecy is a cover-up. Reading 2, the one on the record. The district attorney has publicly said her office's silence is required by law. Grand jury secrecy, not indifference. One of these is an accusation. The other is a documented legal explanation. No one has been charged. No suspect has been named, and frustration is not the same thing as a crime. Let's separate them. Because here's the thing about a void. When a public agency goes silent, we do what humans have always done. We fill it. And the account that's filling it right now is the family's. Let's walk through that account, start to finish, because it deserves to be heard in full. According to the Wells family's legal team, the timeline doesn't add up. GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources shows the boat left Horn Island at about 4:31 p.m. on July 4th. It returned at about 6:06 p.m. Nolan Wells was last seen around 3 p.m. that afternoon. He did not return on that boat. His body was found 2 days later, on July 6th. 2 full days. In the Gulf heat. That's the first thing the family's attorneys point to, and it's a fair one. Then there's the autopsy. The independent autopsy, performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined. Undetermined. That's not a finding, that's a question mark written in medical language. And according to that same autopsy, there was an unexplained red discoloration at the back of Nolan's head. Unexplained, red, discoloration at the back of the head. Now, the state's autopsy is complete, but here's where the account starts to strain. That state autopsy is sealed. It will stay sealed until a grand jury reviews it, and that, according to the district attorney, is the law. But you know what the family's attorneys say about that? They say the DA is not operating in good faith. That's on the record. That's their accusation. And it's been picked up everywhere. Here's what we need to be careful about, and this is the hard part. That accusation, not operating in good faith, that is an advocate's statement. It's one side's legal team doing what legal teams do. It is not a finding, it is not an indictment, it is not evidence of corruption. But let's keep going, because the account doesn't stop there. There's also the audio. You've probably heard about this. The viral clips, the enhanced recordings where you can allegedly hear someone say, "Is he dead?" and "You killed him," and "Wake up." Those clips have been shared millions of times. They've been played in reaction videos. They've been used as proof that something terrible happened on that boat. But here's where the account starts to crack. That audio does not appear in the official Marine Resources recording. According to forensic expert Robert Freed, the enhanced versions are different digital fingerprint, about 20 seconds longer than the official recording. And he couldn't identify those phrases in them at all. He attributed what people think they hear to something called auditory pareidolia. That's when your brain takes random noise and patterns it into something meaningful, like seeing shapes in clouds or hearing words in static. A retired FBI agent listened to the original recording. He said he heard nothing nefarious in it. Nothing. So here's what the family's account asks you to believe. That a district attorney, a state agency, a forensic expert, and a retired FBI agent are all either incompetent or complicit. That the enhanced audio, which doesn't match the official recording, is the truth, and the official recording is the lie. And the threats. 3 people have been charged, but not with Nolan's death, with threats, connected to the case, and none of them knew Nolan Wells. None of them. So the account that's going viral is built on a sealed autopsy, an undetermined independent autopsy, an audio artifact that experts say isn't what it appears to be, and an accusation from the family's own attorneys. That's the account, in full, and when you lay it out like that, it's compelling, it's emotional, it's human, but it is not proof, and that's the part that gets lost, because the family's grief is real, their frustration is real, and when you're grieving, when you've lost your son, you want answers, you demand them, and when the official channels go quiet, legally quiet, but quiet all the same, you start to wonder why. Which brings us to the second account, the one with documents, the one with the law professor, and the one that explains why the silence might not be a cover-up at all. So here it is, the account with the documents. Start with the district attorney herself. Angel Myers McIlrath has not gone silent because she's hiding something. At least, that's not what the record shows. According to WLBT, McIlrath publicly said her office's silence is required by law, not indifference. She cited Mississippi rules of professional conduct. She cited grand jury secrecy. And here's the part that matters. A law professor confirmed that grand jury secrecy carries strict legal standards. That's not a deflection. That's a legal framework. Think about what that framework is actually protecting. The integrity of the investigation. The right of a grand jury to review evidence without public pressure. The presumption of innocence for people who haven't been charged. We're talking about a process designed to keep the investigation clean, not to hide wrongdoing, to protect it from being contaminated. Here's what that means in practice. The state autopsy is complete, but according to PBS NewsHour, it's sealed. Sealed until a grand jury reviews it. That's why you haven't seen findings. That's why the DA's office isn't commenting, not because they're covering up, because the law says they can't comment. And the independent autopsy, the one the family commissioned, according to Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr., it came back undetermined. Cause undetermined. Manner undetermined. With one unexplained red discoloration at the back of the head. That's not evidence of a cover-up. That's a pathologist saying he couldn't determine what happened. Now here's the part that gets left out of the viral posts. There is no filing, no oversight finding, no official, no outlet alleging actual corruption by the DA or her office. According to the Sun Herald and NOLA, the strongest adversarial statement on record is the Wells family's own legal team accusing the DA of not operating in good faith. But that's an accusation. By one side's advocates. It is not evidence. It is not a finding. And that distinction matters. Because the family's attorneys have every right to push. That's their job. But pushing isn't proving. And that's not dismissive of the family's pain. It's just where the law draws the line. Let's talk about the evidence that does exist. GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources shows the boat left Horn Island at about 4:31 p.m. on July 4th. It returned at about 6:06 p.m. Nolan was last seen around 3 p.m. He did not return on the boat. His body was found on July 6th. Those are the coordinates. Those are the times. And according to a former FBI agent, the evidence appears to point to an accident. An accident. Now, nobody has been charged. Nobody has been named a suspect. The friends, Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, Morgan Seymour, and Bart Edmiston Jr. were questioned. That's it. Questioned. Not charged. Not named. According to CNN and Newsweek, 3 people were separately charged with making threats connected to the case. Threats, not the death. And none of them knew Nolan Wells. None of them. Officials have urged the public not to rush to conclusions, and you can hear the frustration in that request. Because the case is still moving. The grand jury hasn't finished. The sealed autopsy hasn't been reviewed. The investigation is not closed. It's in process. So let's put the second account in full. The timeline is documented. The autopsy is undetermined. The audio is an artifact. The DA's silence is legally required. And the corruption claim, the thing that's driving the outrage, rests on an accusation from the family's attorneys, not a finding. Not a charge, an accusation. But here's the thing we have to hold on to. Both of these accounts can't be fully right. One of them has to give. Here's the uncomfortable question that raises. If the corruption claim is an accusation, not a finding, What happens when the grand jury finishes its work? Because that's the moment when either the account gets vindicated or it collapses. So let's lay them side by side, the viral account and the documented one. And here's the thing, they don't just disagree, they collide at specific, measurable points. Point 1. The timeline. According to data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, first reported by Locks and CBS News, Nolan Wells was last seen around 3 p.m. on July 4th. The boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. That's a 91-minute gap, 91 minutes with no documented account. The viral account fills that gap with something sinister. The official record just stops, and then the boat returns at 6:06 p.m. Nolan isn't on it. His body is found July 6th, 2 days later. That's the first collision. A very specific 91-minute window that no public evidence has ever accounted for. Point 2. The audio. You've heard the clips online, "Is he dead? You killed him. Wake up." But according to forensic expert Robert Freed, those phrases appear only in altered third-party enhanced versions, not the official Marine Resources recording. Freed examined them and found a different digital fingerprint. They're about 20 seconds longer than the official one. He attributes those phrases to auditory pareidolia, the brain's tendency to hear meaning in noise. A retired FBI agent reviewed the original and heard nothing nefarious. So here's the collision. The viral audio is 20 seconds longer, digitally different, and the words driving the outrage aren't in the official record. That's not interpretation. That's a measurable difference. And measurable differences are what hold up in court. Point 3. The autopsy. According to PBS NewsHour and WLBT, the independent autopsy by Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr. listed cause and manner of death as undetermined. Undetermined. There was an unexplained red discoloration at the back of the head. The viral account sees that as proof of violence. But the doctor who performed the autopsy didn't call it a homicide, he called it undetermined. Meanwhile, the state autopsy is complete but sealed until a grand jury reviews it. And according to News Nation, a former FBI agent said the evidence appears to point to an accident. So you have two assessments, undetermined and accident. Neither is murder. Point 4. The corruption claim. The question driving all of this, the idea that the DA's office is hiding something. Let's put that to the test. The district attorney, Angel Myers McIlrath, publicly said in late July, according to WLBT, that her office's silence is required by law, not indifference. She cited Mississippi rules of professional conduct and grand jury secrecy. A law professor confirmed that grand jury secrecy carries strict legal standard. Now, the Wells family's legal team has accused the DA of not operating in good faith. But according to the Sun, Herald, and NOLA, there is no filing, no oversight finding, no official, no outlet alleging actual corruption. That's the collision. An accusation from one side's advocates versus a legal obligation. Not a finding, not a charge. And that's a difference that should matter to anyone looking for proof. Point 5. The suspects. No one has been charged in Nolan Wells' death. No suspect has been named. The friends, Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, Morgan Seymour, and Bart Edmiston Jr. were questioned. That's it. Questioned. Not charged, not named. 3 other people were charged with making threats connected to the case. Threats, not the death. And according to CNN and Newsweek, none of them knew Nolan Wells. So the collision here is between suspicion and fact. The viral account treats questioning as guilt. The official record treats questioning as exactly what it is, a conversation, and officials have urged the public not to rush to conclusions. So those are the collision points: the 91-minute gap, the 20-second audio, the undetermined autopsy, the accusation without a finding, the questioned who were never charged. And now the case sits in front of a grand jury. The sealed autopsy hasn't been opened, the investigation is still moving, and here's what's coming next. The moment when the grand jury either lines up with the viral account or lines up with the record. And that's the moment we'll find out which one was real. But before we get to the verdict, whatever it is, we need to talk about what the official record actually supports. because there's a massive difference between what's being said online and what's actually on paper. Let's start with the timeline, because this is the one piece of data no one can argue with. According to Mississippi Department of Marine Resources data reported by Locks and CBS News, the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. on July 4th. It returned at 6:06 p.m. Nolan was last seen around 3 p.m. He did not return on that boat. His body was found on July 6th. That's the record. It's a simple set of times, the kind of thing the grand jury is looking at right now. Here's what those times don't tell us. What happened between 3 and 4:31? That gap is the source of every question. But a gap in the timeline is not evidence of a crime. It's evidence of an incomplete record. And that's a very different thing. Now let's talk about what the official record actually supports. According to the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources data, the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. and returned at 6:06 p.m. on July 4th. Nolan was last seen around 3 p.m. He did not return on the boat. His body was found on July 6th. Those times are from the official GPS data. They're not speculation. They're not from a viral post. They're from the agency's tracking system. The independent autopsy conducted by Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr. found the cause and manner of death undetermined. According to WLBT, there was an unexplained red discoloration at the back of the head, but the doctor did not label it a homicide. Meanwhile, a former FBI agent, Jennifer Coffindaffer, told NewsNation that the evidence appears to point to an accident. Now you might ask, why do the state's findings remain sealed? The answer, repeated across multiple reports, is that the case is pending before a grand jury. That's the mechanism. The DA's office has said its silence is required by Mississippi's rules of professional conduct and grand jury secrecy. And according to WLBT, a law professor confirmed that grand jury secrecy carries strict legal standards. So here's the collision. You have a family's legal team saying the DA isn't operating in good faith, and you have no formal allegation of corruption from any official body or outlet. According to the Sun, Herald, and NOLA, there's no filing, no oversight finding, no investigation into the DA's conduct. The accusation exists in headlines, not in records. What about the people who were questioned? Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, and Morgan Seymour, the friends who were on the boat, and Bart Edmiston Jr. According to CNN and Newsweek, they were interviewed. That's all. No charges have been filed against them, no suspect has been named, and 3 other people face charges related to this case. Threats, not the death itself. None of them even knew Nolan Wells. So the question becomes, where does the record point? It points to an investigation that is by definition incomplete, held up by the legal process of a grand jury. But here's the critical distinction. The record contains no charge, no named suspect, and no official finding of wrongdoing, against the friends or against the DA. And according to the PBS NewsHour, officials have urged the public not to rush to conclusions. That's not a stall. That's a request for patience from the people who actually have the evidence. But here's what nobody wants to hear. The absence of corruption isn't proof of corruption. And the absence of a charge isn't proof of guilt. Those are 2 logical chasms the viral account asks you to jump without a bridge. So where does that leave us? The record independently supports one timeline, one autopsy result, one legal process. It supports an accident or an undetermined outcome. It supports a DA who's legally bound to stay quiet. None of that aligns with the narrative that's been driving millions of views. And now the grand jury has the sealed autopsy, the GPS data, the witness statements. They're deliberating, and when they come back, we'll know if the record holds. Or if it breaks. That's what's next. That's the moment. And it's closer than you think. So where does that leave us? Let's put the records side by side, because that's what the grand jury actually sees. The GPS data puts the boat leaving at 4:31 and returning at 6:06. That's not from a witness with a grudge. That's from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, according to Locks and CBS News. Those are the coordinates, those are the times, and within that window, Nolan Wells did not come back. Now the autopsy. Dr. Roger Mitchell Jr. conducted it independently. His finding, undetermined. Not homicide, not accident. Undetermined. And according to PBS NewsHour, a former FBI agent looked at the same evidence and said it appears to point to an accident. Two professionals, two different conclusions, neither of them is murder. And yet the case is still in front of a grand jury. That matters, because a grand jury doesn't indict on vibes, it indicts on evidence. And right now, the only evidence in the public record, the only evidence that's actually been released, points to an accident or an undetermined death. Now here's the part that doesn't get clicks. According to CNN, 3 people were charged in connection with this case. 3, but not with the death. They were charged with threats. Threats connected to the case, not tied to what happened on that boat. And none of them knew Nolan Wells. That's a critical distinction the viral narrative blurs. If the investigation had produced evidence of a crime, the grand jury would have an indictment by now. Instead, we have a sealed autopsy, a silent DA, and a case still pending. Let's be honest about what the record does and doesn't support. There is no filing, no oversight finding, no official determination that the DA acted in bad faith. The strongest statement against her comes from the Wells family's own legal team, advocates whose job is to advocate. According to the Sun, Herald, and NOLA, they've accused the DA of not operating in good faith. That's a serious accusation. But it's an allegation from one side in a contested matter, not a finding, not a charge, not evidence. Compare that to what the record does show, an independent autopsy that found the cause undetermined, a former FBI agent who reviewed the evidence and told News Nation it points to an accident, a DA who publicly stated her silence is required by law, and a law professor who confirmed that grand jury secrecy carries strict legal standards. That's the weight on one side of the scale. And on the other side, an allegation by the family's lawyers, and a huge amount of public frustration. Now, you might be thinking, why would the family's lawyers say that if there wasn't something there? That's a fair question, and it's one the grand jury is positioned to answer. But here's what the independent record supports. The friends were questioned. They were not charged. Not named as suspects. 3 people face charges related to this case. But, according to CNN and Newsweek, they're charged with threats, not with anything to do with Nolan's death. None of them knew him. That's in the record. The 91-minute gap is in the record. The 20-second difference in the audio is in the record. The undetermined autopsy is in the record. None of that paints a clean picture. But it also doesn't paint the picture that's been painted for you online. And here's the thing about the grand jury. We don't know what they're seeing. The sealed autopsy could change everything, or it could confirm what the independent pathologist found. Undetermined. The grand jury could indict. They could also decline. And until they do, the silence from the DA's office isn't a cover-up. It's the system working the way it's designed. That's confirmed by a law professor, not by us. So we come back to the question that started all of this. Not whether something terrible happened on Horn Island. It did. Nolan Wells is dead. That's the tragedy at the center of every video, every comment, every theory. The question is whether the evidence supports the story the internet has built around his death. And right now, the record independently supports a different picture than the one dominating the timeline. An accident, a pending review, a legally silent DA. But the grand jury is still deliberating. The state autopsy hasn't been released, and the next time we hear from this case, it won't be from a viral account. It'll be from a grand jury's decision. And that's when we'll know whether the record holds or whether the questions Nolan Wells' family has been asking finally get the answers they've been waiting for. That's the moment the silence breaks. And here's what's still pending, and why this case refuses to go quiet. The state autopsy. That's the big one. According to PBS, the complete autopsy is sealed until a grand jury reviews it. We don't know what's in it. The independent pathologist found the cause undetermined, but the state's own examination could tell a different story, or it could confirm his. The grand jury is still deliberating. They could indict, they could decline. They could take weeks or they could take months. And per the DA's public statement, that deliberation happens in total silence, not because anyone's hiding something, but because the law demands it. Now here's what that silence creates, and this is where you have to be honest with yourself about what you're seeing online. People want answers. They want them now. And when a DA's office won't speak, people fill the gap with their own conclusions. The family's lawyers called it bad faith. The DA called it legally required. One of those is an accusation. The other is a sworn duty. They cannot both be true, and right now neither one is proven. Here's another thing still pending. Those 3 people charged with threats. According to CNN, none of them knew Nolan Wells. Their cases are moving through the courts separately, and they have nothing to do with his death. But they're part of this story now because they show us what this case has become, a pressure cooker. And then there's the question nobody outside the grand jury can answer yet. What happened between the time Nolan was last seen on Horn Island and the moment his body was found? The GPS data gives us the boat's timeline, left at 4:31, returned at 6:06, but GPS doesn't tell you what happened in between. The former FBI agent who spoke to News Nation said the evidence points to an accident. The independent pathologist said undetermined. The enhanced audio that went viral, the "Is he dead" clip, couldn't be verified by the forensic expert who examined it. He said the digital fingerprint didn't match the original, and he attributed those phrases to auditory pareidolia, your brain hearing words that aren't there. That's science, not speculation. So what's pending? Everything that matters. The grand jury's decision, the sealed autopsy, the possibility that the next public document resolves this case, or the possibility that it doesn't. But while the legal system works quietly, there's a family in Mississippi still waiting. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He went on a boat trip with friends on the 4th of July, and he didn't come home. His body was found 2 days later, off Horn Island, according to the reports we've reviewed in this series. The comments on the viral post said, "Someone needs to be held accountable," and maybe that's true, but accountability has to start with the truth, not the truth that gets the most likes, the truth that holds up in a courtroom. So here's where we are. No charges in Nolan's death, no named suspect, an autopsy that couldn't determine a cause, a DA who can't talk, an audio recording that experts say doesn't contain what you've been told it contains, and a family who is still waiting. The grand jury will make the next move. And when they do, we'll finally see the sealed autopsy. We'll finally hear what the DA decided. We'll finally know if the record matches the story. But before we go, remember who this case is really about. Not the grand jury, not the viral audio, not the online theories. A wide receiver from Southwest Mississippi Community College. An 18-year-old who went to Horn Island on July 4th. A young man whose mother is still waiting for the phone to ring. Nolan Wells didn't come home from that trip. And whatever the grand jury decides, his family still has to live with that. That's the one fact no investigation can change. The silence will break eventually. But for the people who loved him, the question they've carried since that boat came back without him will remain. What happened to Nolan? And that question deserves an answer. Not a theory, not a viral moment. The truth.